as a general rule, doing the same workout routines every single day just doesn't work with our 28-day clock. It just doesn't. Hello and welcome back to the More to Life YouTube channel. This is our chatty book club, self-help book club, whatever the hell. This is part 3 of In the Flow by Alissa Vitti. We are going from page 100 to 150. And, you know, I had to really be brutal with what I decided to add in here because there is a lot in this 50 pages. I don't want this to become heavy and like, ugh. This is supposed to be fun, expansive. We are expanding our brains and we're just looking for more information on how to work with our bodies rather than against it unknowingly. So the general theme for this episode is that our bodies just are not the same every single day. Therefore, our habits shouldn't be either in terms of our eating habits, our training habits, and so on. Let's start with the whole nutrition side of things because there are ways that you can eat in each phase of your cycle that, first of all, give you immediate rewards in terms of your energy and stuff. Second of all, set you up optimally for the next phase. And the thing is, it's not even about calories, it's not about macros, it's literally just about eating the right foods at the right times. So let's start off with our follicular phase. We actually don't need as much food to be functioning optimally in this phase. So we just need lighter foods, plant-based, pressed salads, which by the way, I didn't know what pressed salad was, but it's like kimchi and sauerkraut and stuff. So the more you know. And then just the likes of veggies, lean proteins, things like that, as well as nutrient-dense, energy-sustaining grains such as oats. Now, I'm the kind of person who eats oats every single day just because I love them so fucking much and I'm the oats queen, but that's a whole other story. The author also suggests supplementing with probiotics in this phase. One reason being that it balances your estrobolome. So when I read this, I was like, oh, well then, if it balances my estrobolome, obviously I'll do that. Not a clue. And it also just primes your body for the next phase, which is ovulation. So speaking of ovulation, our energy and moods are going to be pretty high and also pretty stable in this phase. But she suggests filling up on veggies like red peppers, spinach, tomatoes, leafy greens, things like that, as well as berries like strawberries and raspberries, which are my faves. The thing is, in that first half of our cycle, our metabolism is slower. So we, as a result, don't actually need as much food, as much calories, as much carbs to feel good. Moving on to the luteal phase, the body is starting to need more calories at this point. And she says that not knowing the guidelines properly can trigger sugar cravings. So she suggests proactively eating slow burning carbs like brown rice, whole grains, sweet potato, etc., and eating a lot of cooked leafy greens, as well as eating high fiber foods like pears, apples, chickpeas, and walnuts. And side note, to prevent energy dips when you're on your period, eat more nutrient-dense foods in the luteal phase, the ones that provide more calories. She also says that this way of eating promotes healthy bowel movements as well. So like, happy days all around. Now into the menstrual phase. I know this is one where a lot of us are just like, shut the fuck up, I don't care about being healthy, just give me the chocolate. This is because our hormones and energy is at its lowest at this point. So we compensate for this low energy with high protein and high fats. Healthy fats, of course. And that'll keep your mood and energy stable. In order to keep the blood sugars steady, as well as adding fiber and antioxidants, she suggests eating blueberries and blackberries. And again, just like nutrient dense foods, like your proteins, your fats, your veg, and your fruit. And then she just mentioned something that I was like, oh, is this a universal experience? Because I had no idea. So listen to this, right? She goes, modulating your food cyclically will also help alleviate the weird period poop experience. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not alone. And okay, I know this is like a lot of just random foods and thrown at you, but she does input this all into a table. So I'm going to put this on the screen now and screenshot it if you want. It is very, very helpful rather than me just throwing a list at you. And as you do that, we're going to move into the next section, which is how cyclical eating supports your 5 biological systems. So remember we talked about those 5, it was like brain, immune system, etc. That. We're basically looking now at how cyclical eating impacts each of those things. Starting off with the brain. When we eat cyclically, we have balanced estrogen, and this helps us enhance our verbal and social skills. And the thing is, if we have too much estrogen, it actually can go to an unhealthy extent. Like, it makes you anxious, it makes you brain foggy. Hey Siri, when is my next alarm? Lovely. This is interesting, right? She says, a kale smoothie is great for you during the ovulatory phase when estrogen is high, but when estrogen is dipped in the menstrual phase, it actually kind of works against you. So that's the thing about it's like not just eating healthy, because what does eating healthy mean? It's actually just different foods work better for you at different times. Next, onto the immune system. She says that if you're not eating cyclically, you could be more susceptible to viruses. Honestly, there was a lot more I could have added in here, but that was the main point. So moving on to metabolism. Like I said, in the first half of your cycle, metabolism slows. In the second half, it speeds up, meaning that you burn 8 to 16% more calories per day. And if you're eating the right kinds of foods at the right times, it's gonna just fire up that fat burning ability, which, like, yes please. Your microbiome then, the cyclical advantage is that fermented foods that are recommended in the follicular phase help seed good bacteria. And with the cyclical approach, your gut is never overexposed to any particular food that could create an inflammatory response. I know for a fact, based on just my work as a personal trainer, that inflammatory response is like a whole thing that can impact so much. For example, I'm not allergic, but I have a mild intolerance to onions. When I eat onions, it causes an inflammatory response within me. Basically, I just feel exhausted. I feel like I need to have a nap. And then when I do have that nap, I feel nauseous afterwards. I just feel like shit when I eat onions, particularly red onions. The reason I'm saying this is that inflammatory response can be powerful as so if we can avoid that, we want to avoid that. And the fifth being the stress response. Using the cyclical approach, this helps you avoid not getting the right amounts of certain micronutrients in different phases, because that could ramp up the stress levels big time, particularly in that second half when we already have higher cortisol levels. And lastly, she says, this is interesting because I've never heard this, but she says when you're feeling frazzled, eat seafood, avocado, and dark chocolate, and that'll soothe it. I'm open to try that. Okay, now we're going to move on to something that I was like crying when I was taking my notes about, okay? Caffeine. Let's talk about it. She asks the question, biohacking wonder or flow blocker? I was literally like, uh-oh, don't do this to me. So recently, caffeine emerged as this fat burning, high energy, high effectivity, craving busting kind of tool. But the thing to be aware of is most of the research that this is based on is male focused, as it tends to be. So she says, we all know not to consume caffeine when we're pregnant or breastfeeding, which, by the way, obviously I've never needed to know this information, but that is completely news to me. I thought you could drink coffee when you're pregnant or breastfeeding. I had no idea. But she says coffee and energy drinks are terrible for the female ecosystem at any stage. It may lead to the development of breast and ovarian cysts, particularly if you have PCOS or any other hormonal issues like that. And also your genes impact your ability to metabolize caffeine safely. Caffeine decreases fertility rates, and this is actually both in men and women. It also increases cortisol levels and stress adrenals, interfering with ovulation. Not good. That's the most important part of the cycle. Caffeine also depletes vital vitamins and minerals, including those needed for ovulation and healthy fertility. And get this right, drinking 3+ caffeinated beverages prior to conception increases risk of miscarriage by 74%. Wait, not just 3+, but like 3+ per day. I don't have 3+ per day, but I easily have 2. Okay, maybe it might not be 74%, but it could well be like 50-60%. I don't know, like that's not good. So her recommendation for fixing this, if you will, is a gradual decrease. She says initially move down to half caffeinated, eventually replace with decaffeinated, and then she says switch to, I'm gonna pronounce this so wrong, but rooibos. It's on the screen. But that's the thing. She also says that it's easier to give up caffeine when you're cycle syncing because your energy levels are optimized for the phase of the cycle that you're in, or the part of the cycle. Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. So that's just a very summarized version of what she says on caffeine. let's move on to cooking methods, because apparently there's even best cooking methods to be using at different times of your cycle. In the follicular phase, it's best to use light cooking methods such as sauteing and steaming. In the ovulatory phase, your body is at its warmest, so it's better to have cooler foods like salads and stuff. She says veg, fruit, salads, smoothies, juices, and then if you are cooking, steaming or poaching is best. In the luteal phase, it's better to start using warmer cooking methods such as roasting or baking even. And then in the menstrual phase, of course, she says to have warm, hearty foods like stews and soups. So now she does talk through some different diets and how it's impacted by cycle syncing. She talks about keto, but honestly, there was nothing in there that was groundbreaking to me. She also talks about intermittent fasting. Now, this is something that is so popular. Even my mom and dad are both doing this right now. I used to do this, but she says there's a hormonal disadvantage, and this may cause issues in those with blood sugar problems. And then she quotes this guy called Mark Sisson, who says the only fasting schedule that's safe and effective for women is 12-12. So 12 hours of eating, not constantly obviously, and then 12 hours of fasting. And I had never heard of him before, but he's the author of the Keto Reset Diet. So I'm guessing and hoping that he knows what he's talking about. Next, she talks about gluten-free and grain-free. This is also something that is very popular right now, and like gluten-free options are becoming so much more readily available to us. But she says what isn't common knowledge is that gluten actually has a negative impact on your hormonal health. So she does actually recommend removing it when your cycle syncing. Some advantages she talks about is relief from stomach pain, bloating, brain fog, and faster weight loss. Interesting. But with that said, there are also hormonal disadvantages, such as it won't eliminate cravings, it actually might just make them worse, which makes a lot of sense. If you deny your body certain carbs, it's gonna want the carbs. She also talks about the raw vegan diet, and obviously if you're on a raw vegan diet, naturally the foods that you're eating are just gonna be healthier for it to fall under that category. But it can actually disrupt your cycle and make you miss periods completely, which is not good at all. And it can also lead to micronutrient deficiency due to lack of absorption, because whatever way your body's functioning when you're on a raw vegan diet, it just doesn't absorb the nutrients as well. Now, there's another one she talks about that I was like, wait, what? She said a calorie restriction diet, as if it's like calorie restriction, like rest of your life kind of diet, which I was like, what the what, who, why would anybody do this? It's not good. I'm just thinking like alarm bells for your metabolism, but that's just me coming from a personal training background. She was like, this diet is essentially reducing your calorie intake by 25 to 50% indefinitely. Hello, like metabolism. But the thing to do with cycle syncing is that in the first half, yes, you may lose weight, but in the second half, your body starts to try and prevent ovulation. It can eliminate your period and reduce fertility and more. And I know from my background, I know the cravings will be so bad. Now here's the thing, she does say just because there are disadvantages to a couple of these diets doesn't mean that it's like absolutely don't ever do it. It's not like avoid. However, it's just like something to be aware of if you are planning on using diets like this. And they are all just kind of more geared towards the 24-hour clock, aka the male biological clock. And she does also have a cyclical diet plan. It's on page 124. I'll put it on the screen now. That is really, really helpful. That when I read that, it kind of just solidified the ideas in my mind a little bit more. And some ways to make it easier to actually implement this. Obviously, all of us have to do food shops. All of us have to cook or at least prepare our meals in some way. So the best way to do this is sync your shopping up with the foods of your cycle. Like what foods are you going to be eating because it's this particular phase of your cycle, which I'm sure would take a little bit of getting used to. But I'd say after a couple of weeks of doing that, or maybe a few cycles, you'd actually be like, oh yeah, okay, this is starting to make sense. She also recommends to food prep about twice a week so that you have food for a couple of days rather than just like cooking every single day, and that takes time out of every single day. And obviously that means cooking in big batches. And simplify your pairings, so just have like 2 to 3 different types of food elements in each meal. So whether that's like a rice, a broccoli, a chicken, that's the most basic shit I've ever come up with, but you get you get the point. She does say syncing with your cycle is not as hard as you think, and that it actually should make you feel good rather than deprived. Since we have just stumbled onto this topic, she does give you like 5 quick starts, 5 ways to kind of ease yourself into the cycle syncing, I don't want to say diet, but like nutritional method. You don't have to change everything at once, and you can give yourself some grace with this and also give yourself time to get accustomed to each element. So one way to do it is by rotating just your veggies based on the guidelines that she gives. Another way to do it is by syncing only when PMS strikes. She was like, just start with the most trouble. Well, that came out of nowhere. She says, just start with the most troublesome phase, which is the luteal phase. In this phase, add more complex carbs, your brown rice, your sweet potato, etc. just on days when PMS usually hits. And then just note how you feel. Do you feel happier? Do you have headaches? How's your energy? All those kind of things just to be aware of. The third quick start is just to sync to curb cramps. It says if cramps are your main period problem, change the fats that you eat during menstruation. So have wild salmon and foods high in omega-3 fatty acids. The fourth quick start is to sync your cooking methods, and that be the only thing you do. Again, that seems like a pretty easy way. We just went through the 4 different ways of cooking, like for the phases. And lastly, and I was surprised that this was one of them, but she says seed cycling. So I'm gonna read the notes I have here. In the menstrual phase, follicular phase, and ovulatory phase, so basically everything except luteal, the estrogen levels are rising. So consume 1 tablespoon a day of flax seeds and pumpkin seeds. Flax seeds are high in lignans, which reduces excess estrogen, and pumpkin seeds are high in zinc, which sets the stage for progesterone production in the luteal phase. And then in the luteal phase, she says that progesterone levels are rising. So 1 tablespoon a day of sesame and sunflower seeds. Sesame seeds are also high in lignans, but not as much as flax seeds, and they reduce excess estrogen. And they're also high in zinc, which promotes progesterone production. And then the sunflower seeds are high in selenium, which helps with liver detoxification, vitamin E, and healthy progesterone levels. That's a lot of stuff. Basically, in the luteal phase, a tablespoon a day is sesame and sunflower seeds, and then in all the other phases, a tablespoon a day of flax and pumpkin seeds. So it's actually pretty simple when you're not looking at the science of it, but when you actually read the reasons behind it, just makes it sound way more complicated than it actually is. All right, so that actually wraps up the nutrition side of things. Now we're going to move on to the training side of things. This is my jam. This is like, oh. As a general rule, doing the same workout routines every single day just doesn't work with our 28-day clock. It just doesn't. In the first half, you burn fat more easily and you gain lean muscle more easily because the body more easily accesses carbs for fuel, which leads to greater energy, greater stamina, just more intense workouts. Also in the first half, you have more testosterone available to you, which is good for those aesthetic kind of goals. She says the follicular phase is when you can really crank up the intensity, hit it hard at the gym, and just see the weight melt off. In the second half then, your metabolism speeds up more naturally, but more intense exercise in this phase is kind of going to work against you. It's just going to pump out cortisol, which leads to increased fat storage and muscle wastage, which we absolutely don't want. She says you're just not going to get the aesthetic effects as much if you train for that in the second half of your cycle. I'm going to say something. I know so many people who train for aesthetics and they train really hard and they are hormonally just like, I know a lot of bodybuilders in the gym that I work in. There's a lot of bodybuilders that go there that actually compete in bodybuilding, both male and female, and the women just like lose their periods for months, if not years. And the men, there's a whole host of other issues going on there. I actually won't get into it. In the book, she gives an example of this triathlete who had been running long distance since she was a teenager. And she still hadn't gotten her first period by the age of 19. 19! Like, that's insane. This is how much your hormones have an impact and like a hold over your body. This triathlete also developed borderline osteoporosis as a result of the hormonal messed upness, basically the lack of estrogen. Going to the gym and just going absolutely all out when you're already chronically stressed just leaves you more fatigued. All right, so now we're going to go into phase specific ideal exercise types, right? So in the follicular phase, let's start off with that. Wake your body up with fun cardio. Side note, if your hormones are or if you're struggling with anxiety, fatigue, or depression, keep it at 30 minutes max, because any more than that will just overstress your body and push more fat into storage. So the types of fun cardio she says are running, dancing, hiking, cycling, and skipping. I hear dancing, I hear skipping, and I'm good. Then in the ovulatory phase, this is when your estrogen and testosterone levels are at peak, giving you just energy to burn. And this is when you can smash your most intense workouts. For example, interval sprints, HIIT, indoor cycle, boot camp, kickboxing. And to me, when I hear your absolute most intense workouts, I think heavy leg day or high volume leg day, or probably just any leg day. Then in the luteal phase, at the beginning, your energy is still high, but just not as much. So in the first half, she says strength training and intense yoga. And in the second half, Pilates, bar, and gentle yoga. Then menstruation. This is when your hormones and your energy is at its absolute lowest. So you really have to be compassionate with yourself here. It's tough sometimes, especially when we got goals, but that high output and high intensity workouts will just backfire anyway. So here, just do what feels restorative, and most importantly, get better sleep. So the options she gives here are going for a walk, foam rolling, yin yoga, and mat Pilates. Oh yeah, and breath work and taking a nap. So if there are days where you're like, you know what, I actually just want to sleep, I don't want to do anything, do that. You're absolutely fine to take extra rest days in your menstrual phase. Like, your body's going through a lot. And then she gives 4 steps to get in sync with your workouts. First things first, she says, note where you are in your cycle and stop beating yourself up. So if that means like, when your energy is high, or when your energy is supposed to be high, you don't really feel like doing high intensity workouts, that's cool. Your body's communicating something to you. And same goes for the other way around. If you're in your menstrual phase and you're like, John, I feel like I got a rock solid leg day in me, go for it. Number 2, have an exit plan, particularly if your needs are at those 30 minutes max. Remember, she said if your hormones are imbalanced, or you got fatigue or depression or anxiety, make sure that after those 30 minutes you're gonna stop. So if you're doing a group class and it's 45 minutes, tell the instructor beforehand, or just have some kind of plan that means that you're not gonna do any more after those 30 minutes, because for you that actually is enough. And then lastly, after your workout, just be honest with yourself and ask how you actually feel. Like, how is your energy? Do you feel drained, or do you feel like you could take on the world? Your body is always telling you what's up. Those are really the main takeaways regarding the training part. And then she does have a little section on postpartum, and she just says, if you're in a postpartum phase of your life, treat it as an extended menstrual phase. So however you would eat and however you would work out in that phase, do that here too. So you would eat a lot more nutrient dense foods, a lot more slow burning carbs, and you would have a lot of rest sprinkled with a little bit of gentle exercise. Okay, so that brings us to the end of part 3 of diving into In the Flow. Now in the next video we're going to be going all the way up to page 200, so we got another 50 pages to read through before we get there. What has been your main takeaway from this series so far, or even just this video? Because honestly, there are so many ways we can actionably take this into our lives, and yeah, I definitely want to start tweaking my lifestyle to suit my cycle. It just makes so much sense. Like, at this point, I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? Even if it's just gently and imperfectly moving into it, I would love to do that. Other than that, obviously, there's been a bit of a gap between this video and my previous video. That is because I was in New York. Wasn't exactly going to be filming one of these when I was in New York, so there has been a bit of a delay. Also, I actually vlogged New York, so that will be up soonish as well. Anyway, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.